In the year 2017, and to the dismay of many people, Ousama Game, the animation, was released. Being another take on the niche but endearing genre of survival games, Ousama Game, or King's Game in English, managed to disappoint casual and hardcore anime fans. And while we know that Ousama Game is an easy target, being prime material for Please Don't Watch series, we still wanted to give it a fair assessment, a decision that might or might not affect our mental sanity in the future. Regardless, let's take a deep dive into King's Game to understand what went wrong and what is salvageable from this work of art.
Ousama Game, the animation, being released in fall 2017, had its fair share of competitors. You could drive yourself insane by watching this thing, or watch Black Clover or Shokugeki no Soma Season 3. The choice is yours. Who was in charge of this project? Studio 7 took the challenge to bring King's Game to the TV. Who are they, you might ask? Well, if you haven't heard much about them, I don't blame you. Studio 7 is mostly a hentai studio, with only a handful of projects not related to the genre. So we aren't talking about top tier shit from the get-go. As for how they handled this particular project, well...
Ah boy, here we go!
It's necessary to mention what the source material for this franchise is. No, it's not a manga, it's not a light novel either, nor a web novel. Nope, it's a fucking cell phone novel. What's that, I hear you ask? Well, they are novels sent to people through SMS or email, usually around 70 to 100 words per chapter, which is honestly mind-boggling for me. Still, while the format might have been a bit better fit for the story, emphasis on might, it doesn't erase the fact that it translates horribly into other media.
I had watched this anime back when it released, but I couldn't remember much of it for some reason. So when we had no idea what to watch next, and with the goal of it not being another fucking ecchi, I proposed it because it was the first thing that came to mind. I promise, I don't only watch ecchi, or crap, or ecchi crap. Anyways, I honestly couldn't believe the insanely low score and awful reviews. I thought, it wasn't that bad, was it? So I started watching it with no expectations and an open mind. That went to shit literally on the first scene. It was supposed to be shocking, but only left me wondering about the life decisions I took to be stuck watching this for a second time. This anime is just bad. How is it supposed to cause me horror when nothing makes sense and when someone dies I laugh? At the very least, it is so bad that it's good. Watching it as a comedy with friends made it enjoyable, but even then, it has a couple of episodes that are boring as fuck in every regard.
We knew from the start that the show was going to be bad, with positive comments about the show being very scarce. I still wanted to give it a fair chance. With my usual, it can't be that bad. I was wrong. The anime was, without a doubt, really bad. Nonsensical story, inconsistent and dumb characters, terrible rhythm and pacing, and fusing two stories into one was an awful decision from the get-go. The anime got really boring at some points, but it was somewhat bearable. Not by the merits of the writing, mind you, but because I watched this thing with friends.
I'll be honest with you. When we were thinking what show were we going to watch next, as soon as I heard the scores for this series were, I knew this was going to be both very fun and very infuriating. I still gave it a real chance, since I quite enjoy the horror genre, but as soon as the first episode finished, I was like, what the fuck is going on? There's a lot of issues here, far more than I can properly assess in this section, but that's what the rest of the video is for. It's bad, real bad, but I enjoyed it in the same way someone can enjoy a bad horror movie, by laughing at it. Some death scenes were truly comical, and the shitty plot only served to make me laugh even more. It wasn't all laughs though, as the show made me angry, a lot, to the point where I was kinda numb to all the bullshit near the end. Still, as bad as it was, the power of friendship was enough to make it, watchable.
Visually, the anime is unremarkable at best and hilarious at worst. Being a survival game with core elements, a good laugh is probably a reaction that you don't want from your viewers. But let's go little by little. Animation wise, it's the standard from the time period. Overall decent animation, but nothing special. There aren't many things to animate though. with the deaths and few scenes in the first episode being the showcase of the studio's animation prowess, which isn't stellar. A few times characters skipped frames, they had no eyes in several shots, which we don't think was an artistic choice most of the time, by the way, and they looked really bad on several occasions. Another funny issue is the weird frame rate of certain scenes, that range from 2 frame movements to 144 Hz fights out of nowhere. For the most part it is half decent when they try, shit when they don't.
Color-wise, it's pretty sober, which is alright for the type of story. Aside from Ria being the only character with a different color scheme, that being completely white, there's nothing distracting in this department. None of the characters really stand out design or color-wise, but we take what you can get from this point. It's alright.
For better or for worse, we have to talk about death scenes, a popular selling point in this genre of anime. We won't sugarcoat it, they are bad. People just lose their head or explode out of nowhere. Sometimes characters even lose their limbs, flying like 10 meters away from the victim, throwing liters and liters of what looks like petroleum? Just because. Making a hagaos, of course. Some of our best picks are the pepperoni guy, I remember, and The Exorcist. Only a few deaths were handled properly, but for most of them they lacked both visual and narrative impact. Man, you can add a laugh track to these deaths and they work better as a comedy. Nothing to see here, folks.
As for the audio, there's not much to talk about. The soundtrack was there. The opening, while it was alright I guess, it wasn't really of our taste. It felt like your average edgy song for an over-the-top gore story. If there's something we had to mention about the audio, it is the lack of impact in the sound effects. When they are used, of course. Oddly enough, when characters throw a punch, while the animation is alright, the sound effects tend to be very low, and it is very distracting. If it happened once, we could overlook it, but it happens a lot, and very often. Kicks, beating and punches sound very calm, so they don't convey the feeling of pressure and tension that they are supposed to do. At some points I wonder whether they were punching the characters or sexually harassing them.
When it comes to the voiceover, at least the Japanese version was okay. There were no confusing emotions, although some of them were not fit for every scene. For example, Riona's Seiyu, with her soft voice, wasn't really cut for certain scenes, doing the same tone for calm moments as well as intense action, like using a fucking chainsaw. Aside from that, it was a decent job for most of the cast, but nothing outstanding. The script didn't help for sure, so we will give them some slack on this one. Some people like the protagonist's performance, but that's up to you.
The story is easily the worst aspect of the series, bringing an actually interesting plot, only to crush it beyond recognition under the heel of incompetence. The premise for Ousama Game is simple. A class is chosen to participate in the King's Game, where they're given instructions through their cell phones, ranging from licking the feet of other students to edgy games that will impart punishment to the losers. Failure to comply with these orders or breaking the arbitrary rules established at the beginning will also cause a punishment. What are these punishments, you may ask? Well, there's some tame ones, like having to confess to the person you like, but the great majority are just different flavors of death.
It's also important to note that a great deal of early orders and even some punishments are weirdly sexual, which makes the king seem like a pervert, and takes a lot of the tension away from the moment where they are revealed. Among the myriad of problems the series has, a few come to mind as more prominent, such as having about 70% of the student deaths happening off-screen. One could say that it was done so the show wouldn't drag on as a gore fest, but what's the point in naming such a wide cast then? The only thing it does is artificially raise the kill count for reasons. It could have easily been solved by changing the setting to a smaller class, a club, or something, and nothing of value would have been lost. It might have even helped, since we will have a bit more time to get invested in these characters we are supposed to care about. We thought this could have been an anime exclusive move, but the same shit happens in the manga, so all hope is lost.
Another major headache for us was the reveal of what the king actually is. Spoilers, I guess. It's, in simple terms, a biological, constantly mutating virus that somehow made itself digital and acts by implanting suggestions into the host to kill them, until one of them remains, repeating the process afterwards. If that makes sense to you, please see a doctor. This is easily one of the stupidest ideas I have ever seen on antagonistic force. It only serves to take away the mystery for a phenomenon that was better left unexplained, as now instead of an unknown force inflicting suffering on seemingly innocent high school students, we get an explanation that makes me remember that people thought that 5G made you sick.
Still, the main narrative issue in the series, in my opinion, is the fact that it tried to cram two different stories, King's Game and King's Game Extreme, into a single season, presumably due to a lack of content, as both stories are quite short on their own. Although an argument can be made for the producers not being confident on releasing two seasons on what is essentially the same fucking story, what we see is both games that our protagonist has been a part of, starting with the second game after a bit of PTSD, and being shown the first one through flashbacks. Mind you, this isn't done organically throughout the season, as the first 6 episodes are mostly used for the protagonist monologuing his backstory to his new friends, while the real time elapsed is like less than a day. What's the plot for the first King's Game? The class of our protagonist is issued orders, at the risk of being punished by being killed, until only one remains. Pretty much the same as the second game, except Nobuaki had a girlfriend then, and didn't have the experience of being a survivor. Like, that helped a lot. This problem is exacerbated by the fact that we, as viewers knowing the setting of the series, already know the end of the first King's Game. If you didn't guess it already, this is your spoiler alert. Everyone is dead except the protagonist. So every scene from the past that puts him in danger has negative tension. We know the outcome, and the character interactions aren't nearly good enough to carry the plot.
Most characters are just plain stereotypes, they have no personality. But a few main characters with no backstory or meaningful purposes, and the rest are just fillers whose only purpose is to die. We don't even get to see half of the people that died, we just know their name and cause of death, so they should go without saying that no one gets a proper introduction and there is no real character development.
I'm dead!
For the sake of organizing this mess, we divided the characters from the first game and the second one in different sections, so, of course, we're gonna start with the first game. We have our protagonist, Nobuaki Kanazawa. He's a roller coaster of emotions, which is now kind of understandable because he loses all his friends and classmates in the first King's Game. After that, he transfers to a new school, but he's traumatized and can't make new friends out of fear of losing them again. This guy is always crying and being sorry for himself and everyone else's existence, which, like we said before, it's understandable. But he goes from wanting to kill himself and his classmates to being ready to survive and help everyone overcome the second King's Game in a flash. Basically, his mood depends on what the story needs at any given point. Naoya Hashimoto, involuntary cooker. He's Nobuaki's friend, and after getting punched in the face and passing out, he is, raped? He cooks his best friend involuntarily. We laugh so hard with this scene that our stomach still hurts. Well, he dies after sacrificing himself in a dice game. Then we have Daisuke Tasaki, a known cooker as well. He's Nobuaki and Naoya's friend, and was ordered to hook up with Shota's girlfriend, and they did out of fear to die. Then, in revenge, Shota ordered him to hang himself, so he dies. Cookers have it rough in this anime, you know? And you might ask, who Shota is? Well, who gives a shit? Then we have Chie Mionda, Nobuaki's girlfriend. She's there to look cute and abuse Naoya while asleep. Then she dies. How does she die? while she commits seppuku so Nobaki can live. As a side note, her death scene is different in the manga, where she dies by bleeding out, but the final result is the same. So bad. Well, then we have Ria Iwamura, a key character in the research of the King's Game. She is a quiet and unfriendly character, but she needed a reason to exist in the story, so they mentioned that her father raped her. At least when she dies by incineration, she ascends to a different plane, becoming a light being. Then we have Yusuke. Yusuke from Persona 5. Another key character in the research of the King's Game. His Google search and email sending skills were vital in solving the mystery. His 5 minutes on screen were enough to get in love with his childhood friend when they finally managed to exchange phone numbers after knowing each other for like 12 years. Then he dies for being a crybaby. Finally, we have Nami Hirano, a classmate with a crush on Nobaki, was dumb enough to give herself the order of touching the king and goes blind as a punishment. Great, at least she won't die, so the king isn't such an asshole after all. Wrong! Then she decides to commit suicide by drowning in the sea for the plot's sake. God damn it!
Natsuko Honda, the main antagonist. She has a facade of being a sweet and cheerful person. At the start, she has a crush on the protagonist, she helps her class win a race on a sports day, and is a popular girl. Overall, 100% approved waifu material. But when the second King's Game starts, she shows a twisted and dark side. She becomes a despicable character, someone heartless, willing to do anything to survive with no remorse. She is the character that kind of makes the most sense. She was part of a previous King's Game, which we can assume damaged her personality just like the protagonist. But at least she's true to her new evil self. That is until episode 12, where nothing makes sense. Aimi Murasumi. She is Natsuko's best friend. Spends a lot of time wondering if Natsuko has changed, like she raped and killed without hesitation. Maybe she is a bad person. But the moment Natsuko broke Amy's hand to save herself after refusing to break one finger to save Amy, it all made sense. Natsuko was indeed Amy's best friend.
It's the best friends forever! Best friends forever!
So Amy saves Natsuko from dying. Then she sacrificed herself so Nobuaki wouldn't die. Teruaki Nagata, the yaoi character. He's raped by Natsuko, then does the most 5-hit 6D chest play of the anime. Breaks one of his hands so he can kill Natsuko. It totally would be a shame if someone were to save her, right? All of this, of course, after letting us know that he has a dream of becoming a hairdresser, just so we feel bad for him because that won't be possible anymore. Not that it matters though, he is decapitated the next episode. Ryo Sugisawa, the nonsensical femboy. He is Teruaki's best friend and goes crazy after his death. I'm talking full Kotonoha mode. The whole time we were wondering when he was going to get a boat and live with Teruaki's head, but he did manage to go sane again. Or did he? Because later, out of nowhere he decides that in order to prove he is strong, he has to cut his legs with a chainsaw. Easily the most annoying scene and character for me. Ryona Matsumoto, the first waifu. She's shown for 1 second on the first episode, then weirdly introduced back on episode 8. She is easily mistakable for a similarly designed character who appeared on episode 7, killing all her family but not being able to kill her pet. By the way, we assume this killer character dies because she never appears again. Not sure why she was shown in the first place. Anyways, Ryona is in the series just because the previous waifu died and a replacement was needed. She drowns herself in the end. Kenta Akamatsu. He is a bro, the only person on the protagonist's side at the start of the second King's Game. He defends Nobuaki and takes him to the hospital, gets in love with Mitsuki in like 2 minutes and swears to protect her. Then he tries to save her by of course sacrificing himself, but it's all in vain as usual. Mizuki Yukimura, a very dumb character. She gets the chance to kill Natsuko and someone else, but instead she wants to kill herself and Kenta, because dying together with your recently discovered love makes more sense than wanting to survive with him. She makes a mess, goes unconscious, kills Kenta by proxy, and dies anyway.
There are a crap ton more characters, but they're all the same. We just listed the quote-unquote important ones, and some funny ones too. You should also know that everyone has something in common. They get either a sudden romance, a sad backstory, or a dream they want to fulfill just before they die, hoping the viewers will feel bad for them. Why do we talk so much about them, you might ask? Well, it's actually funny how characters don't even matter, but we manage to talk a lot about them because, one, that's pretty much the entire impact that these characters have for most of the story. Two, it's funny to make fun of these so-called characters because they have less traction than a fanboy gathering. And three, all of this is build up for the best character in the entire franchise. Masatoshi, the true hero and overlord. Rest in peace, my sweet prince. You left us too soon. Or you escaped from the crappy show by dying, you motherfucker. In summary, characters are shit. Moving on.
So, one of our main gripes with the story was its overpacing. The first King's Game getting in the way of the second one, with flashbacks lasting for like 2 consecutive episodes, and all the tension that was supposed to be building up dissipates out of nowhere. The anime starts in the present, lasting for like 2 episodes, then coming back for real on episode 7 or so. This brings its own set of issues. For starters, each King's Game had its own proper story. In the manga, each game is covered separately, so adapting both at the same time is bound to leave one of them, or both in this case, unfinished and rushed. Even worse, the fact that we start from the second game in the anime, with the main character stating, "I'm the only one who survived the first King's Game," has the following issues. For starters, we already know the outcome of the first game. Everyone's dead. So why should we care? We know that the main character survived and all his friends are dead. Secondly, all the nuances and tension from the first game are simply gone, as it is presented as flashbacks, thus we already know the final outcome, making it pointless for the viewer for the most part. Aside from a few details to connect both stories, such as the main protagonist and lore, both games are independent from each other and should have been told separately.
While the backstory and lore is still questionable, we believe that a better product could have been delivered with the same 12-episode runtime. Solution number 1: focus on the first game altogether, adapt the second one in a new season if it sells. Solution number 2, same as before, with the one adapted being the second game, and only doing parallels and brief flashbacks when needed. And solution number 3, use 5 to 6 episodes to animate the first game, then the remaining episodes for the second game. While this might make both games look rushed at first glance, nothing much happens in each game, so it is a doable solution without missing much content. As it is right now, Ousama Game makes more harm than good to the franchise, and even when the source material isn't flawless by any means, the anime adaptation is still at disservice to the manga and the novel. Just organize the contents of the show properly and you will have gotten a better product, not the bloated mess that it is right now.
Is this just a bad anime adaptation? Is the manga any better? We know that the original source material was an SMS novel. However, the closest approximation will be the manga. So, these were our findings. The manga solves exactly one problem with the anime adaptation. The stories are completely separate, nothing else. And that's barely a positive. You get to experience only one horrible story at a time. Wow, what an improvement. The manga's simple title, King's Game, is carried entirely by its premise. It's a somewhat fresh take on the bloated death game genre, at least for the standards of 2009. Outside of the solid premise, it doesn't have much going for it. And a premise alone only gets you so far. We could mention how the art is really good early on, but much like the plot itself, it takes a nosedive as soon as Volume 3 comes around. It goes from beautiful full-page panels and solid spreads to those constant talking head scenes seemingly out of nowhere. There are points where it goes around 100 pages without a single outstanding panel. It's incredibly uninteresting visually, and gets worse with each volume. In terms of story, it's slightly different towards the end, but for the most part remains the same as the anime. There's not much else to say really. It starts off really tense and suspenseful, but towards the end there's people dying left and right, which makes that game lose all its edge when it's no longer who's going to die, but rather when are the cardboard cutouts going to drop dead. The characters themselves are not worth caring about. They are somehow less than one-dimensional, get no development whatsoever, no background and no focus. There's a single death that has any real impact, and it happens at the beginning. If the deaths in your death game might as well happen off screen, many of them do in fact. You may want to make a few revisions, you know.
The sequel, Ousama Game Extreme, is unsurprisingly also bad. Not even bad with a solid start like the original, Extreme doesn't even pretend to be decent. It doesn't need to. The original sold well enough that this could have been a blank book with a big fuck you message in the last page, and it would have performed without much loss in quality. In terms of story, Extreme picks up 7 months after the end of the original, with Nobuaki, the lone survivor, transferring school and trying to start on a clean slate. The second King's game begins shortly after, and the gang has to try their best to get through it or die trying. However, Nobuaki's trauma from the events of the first game makes it hard for him to get close to the new students.
This is a good start on paper, if not for the fact that in this manga, Nobuaki is an entirely different character. Not in the same guy but bolted by trauma sense, but in the this new guy acts nothing like the old one in the slightest sense. Extreme Nobuaki is whiny, edgy, and indecisive. If there is anything positive we can say about the original story, it's that Nobuaki was an okay protagonist, someone with the drive to keep going and hold back when necessary, and some others could mostly rely on. There is something to be said about how traumatic events change people, and major change post-trauma can and does happen in real life, but it feels like this was simply a case of him being completely changed because the author couldn't bother modifying the introductory chapters to fit his whole persona, and changing him instead was just less work. Not to mention that the art in Extreme is an awful fit for the genre. It looks less like King's Game and more like Last Game. Any semblance of the visual horror from the original is gone. Instead of the more realistic proportions of the first manga, you get large round eyes and simplified softer expression. It's jarring to see a Dead Game manga that looks like a cheesy romance story. There are some thriller series where a softer, more anime art style has worked great, like Real Account, but they are few and far between, and certainly not as terrible as King's Game.
Oh well, what a ride! Aside from a half-decent premise, Ousama Game offers nothing but headaches and a nonsensical plot only matched by the 5G conspiracy theory. Wait, the anime adaptation has nothing remarkable. Rushed plot, dumb characters, and a weird fusion of 2 mangas into one story that didn't pay off in the end. Death scenes are funny rather than scary, and the show offers less content than a Final Destination movie. As for the manga, while it is better and expands the characters a bit more, with more characterization and more time to develop each scene, it's saying that the shit that I took yesterday is better than the one I took today. The lore of the franchise is so hard to follow that most people recommend reading a prequel manga to understand the King's Game lore. A prequel manga that was released after the original release of both mangas? Maybe, just maybe, you should look into your writing skills if you're facing this kind of predicament. Unfortunately, we can't recommend the show unless you like it's so bad it's good kind of show. But even then, it might fail to entertain all viewers from this niche, with story bits and pacing more akin to a fucking fever dream. We highly recommend sticking to a different franchise altogether if you value your mental sanity, that is, or if you're into NTR.